Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I am joined by Dr. Jeff McNairy, who is the Chief Medical Officer and one of the founders of Rythmia Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica, which is one of the world's, or perhaps the world's only medically licensed psychedelic retreat center offering sessions with ayahuasca. Jeff and I met the other month to have a long and lengthy conversation about Rythmia. We get into a number of topics, including just the history and founding of Rythmia, the process of medical licensing and what that means for the retreat center, their promotion of the idea that their clients receive miracles. We kind of unpack just what do they mean by that, get into the issue of why they like to offer ceremonies with a large number of participants, and more. You can hear all about it in our interview, but of course, a few quick announcements before we get to that. So, as I have been mentioning regularly recently here on the podcast, that I have been uploading more materials to the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel, and some of the things will eventually be coming out here on the podcast because this does have wider distribution, goes to different channels such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of that. But at the moment, I have a couple more new videos over at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel that I would like to invite you to check out if you haven't seen them already. The first that I wanted to bring to your attention is I have a new video that is entitled The Lecky Protocol, which is about vaporized and injectable 5-MeO-DMT. This is a conversation I had with Steve Rio of Enfold in Canada, where they work with 5-MeO-DMT, and in addition to just talking about 5-MeO-DMT and doing lots of the ins and outs and the ups and downs and all of that, we specifically had this conversation so we could talk about this Lecky protocol, which was viewed by perhaps hundreds of thousands of people around the world when Brian Johnson got his live-streamed 5-MeO-DMT experience of vaporized plus injectable 5-MeO-DMT. So we decided to make this video, that's Steve and I, just to talk all about it and explain the logic and the rationale behind it, how it was developed, and why and how it works the way that it does. So that video is over there at the YouTube channel. Probably eventually I will put that conversation here on the podcast, but for now, it's exclusively at the Entheogenic Evolution on YouTube. Also, over this past week, I created and uploaded another new video, which is just me talking about full disclosure and informed consent about topics of conversation that really ought to happen between 5-MeO-DMT facilitators and their potential clients before anyone is served the medicine. So that also is exclusively over at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel. It might be a podcast episode somewhere weeks down the road from today. And also, as I've mentioned here on the podcast, what I have been doing additionally over at the YouTube Entheogenic Evolution channel is uploading almost daily little nature slideshows. This is just my nature photography. There's lots of birds, flowers, landscapes, waterfalls, ocean scenes, sunsets, things like that, all set to my original music. They're all under 1 minute, so you can find those under the shorts section at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel. And it's just to brighten your day with some beautiful nature and help you feel inspired and connected to this amazing, beautiful world that we all live in. I think everybody could use more nature. So anyway, that's what's going on over at the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel. I invite you to check it out. If you haven't checked it out, you can subscribe, you can like, you can comment, all the regular YouTube stuff. But as I've been mentioning over recent weeks, that I really have not attended to the YouTube channel for the Entheogenic Evolution, and I'm just looking to build that up a little bit more, so I'm publishing more stuff over there. And some of it will transfer over here to the podcast, some of it won't. And of course, the entire podcast is available at YouTube through the Entheogenic Evolution channel. And I've also, as I've mentioned, I have organized many of the interviews into different playlists. So we have like Psychedelic Oregon, we've got psychedelic writers and authors, we have psychedelic retreats and healing centers, psychedelic training, facilitation and integration, psychedelic churches and entheogenic sacraments, and of course, the master playlist of 5-MeO-DMT, the God molecule. Anyway, check it out. Speaking of 5MEO, of course, I'm always available for 30, 60, or 90 minutes to help you integrate your entheogenic session. I specialize in 5MEO DMT, but I'm not limited to that in any way, shape, or form, and more than happy to talk to you about any psychedelic or entheogenic experience, and I provide integration, reflection, and feedback from a non-dual and energetic perspective. You can just reach out at martinwball@gmail.com for more information, or stop by at martinball.net and check out the information that I have on my personal webpage about my integration services. And if you would like to support this podcast, as I always mention, please stop by patreon.com/martinwball. And there's everywhere from $1 a month up to $100 a month, which also gets you a 1-hour monthly video call and check-in with me. And there's no obligation. You can change your level at any time. And as I like to remind you, if you sign up at the $20 a month level and up, that gets you full access to the Entheogenic Evolution Archive, which has hundreds of hours of talks and interviews and materials that were formerly available here on the podcast but are not available publicly anywhere else. It's exclusively available for my supporters over at Patreon. So that's patreon.com/martinwball. Okay, that's enough in terms of announcements. Let's go ahead and get into this conversation with Dr. Jeff McNairy, who, as I mentioned, is the Chief Medical Officer and one of the founders of Rythmia Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica. You can find them online at rythmia.com. That's RYTHMIA.com. I hope you enjoy this interview. Here we go. Well, I'm welcoming on to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today Dr. Jeff McNairy, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Rythmia Retreat Center in Costa Rica, which I'm sure many of my audience have heard about, and maybe some of you have probably gone there. Is a rather popular retreat center. But Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to explain a little bit about what we're doing down there in Costa Rica.
Yeah, well, let's start with, I always like to start personal. Before we get into like the retreat center and stuff like that. But let's also start with, where are we currently connecting from in the world? Are you currently in the Tamarindo area of Costa Rica?
I've been down there for about 10 years. I live there with my family, but at the moment I'm in San Diego, California, visiting some in-laws.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, how's San Diego? That's where my daughter currently lives.
Amazing. I love it down here. Good surf, nice people, good food. I love San Diego. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I would come down here every so often and hang out and just enjoy the weather.
Yeah. So are you a surfer?
Yes. Grew up surfing in the west side of Los Angeles, mostly Venice and Santa Monica. And we dabble a little bit in Orange County, Huntington and Newport.
Yeah. And do you surf down there in Tamarindo? I know that's a big surf spot.
Really good waves. Yeah. I've surfed almost every day down in Costa Rica. I lived in Hawaii for a while, and that was unreal. So I was on Oahu, so I got to surf the North Shore quite a bit, and some of the lesser known spots on the east side, which is where I was living.
Yeah. So then are you mostly down in Tamarindo when you're not, visiting family or folks?
Yeah. I'm in that area. I live a couple minutes from Rythmia in this gated community called Hacienda Pinilla, and it's just south of Tamarindo, maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. So this is just a question about Costa Rica, because I'm just curious. So my wife and my son and I, we visited Tamarindo. It was a couple years ago now. I think it was in the spring. We travel a lot, so I forget exactly when we were there. And it was super, super dry. And there was like little brush fires that were, like kind of out in the jungle, just smoldering. I mean, not like, so I live in, Southern Oregon. We get massive fires up here. So I know it's different. But I was curious what your experience is of living in Tamarindo, because you've been in other places in Costa Rica, but it's super green. Like we had gone from Arenal to Tamarindo, and it was like, oh man, it's so dry here.
Yes. They call the Tamarindo area, they call it a dry jungle. And it does have a rainy season where it's a little bit more lush and green and not as dry, but it is more dry than the southern part of the country. And so when you're at Arenal, the volcano, which is like right in the middle of the country, from there south, it's very thick. Like Manuel Antonio is a natural or a national park on the Pacific side. Maybe you went there too.
Yeah, I've been there.
lush and beautiful rainforest. So there's that part south. So we're on the Pacific side, northern, near Nicaragua, to be honest. Is like an hour and a half drive.
Yeah.
So up there it's a little dry, and even though there is a lot of farmlands where we are, and it's very humid in the off months, right now is the summertime in Costa Rica. So right now is that dry time again. It's really hot.
Yeah. Yeah. Hot, dry, and not green.
No, brown. Looks like the outback of Australia.
Yeah. 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 I get that.
Definitely. With just as many critters.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of critters, this is also something I always ask people in Costa Rica because I've done quite a few interviews. And actually there's an interview, the next interview that's coming out on the podcast, which will be the past from the time that we are now having this conversation. But it's also with a woman who runs a retreat center with Iboga in Costa Rica.
Oh, nice.
Let me
I know her.
Yeah, I'm just going to grab her name. Tracy Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tracy Scott.
Yep, I know who that is.
So I asked her about this because one of the big things that brings my family and I to Costa Rica is the wildlife and the birds. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a hardcore birder. I've got all the camera gear and all of that.
Nice.
I love birding in Costa Rica. And actually, it was when I was in Tamarindo. Okay, so sorry, diversion, telling a little story. I'm walking around with my camera and my big 600 millimeter lens, and some American expat walks up to me and he's like, "Oh, you like birding?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, well, I've lived here for like 20 years. Is this a good place for birding?" I was like, "Dude, you've lived in Costa Rica for 20 years and you don't know if it's good for birding? I mean, it's one of the best birding spots in the world."
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my question for you, Jeff. You into birds? You into wildlife? You enjoy that there?
Absolutely. My brother is a birder, and he loves. I've learned a little bit from him. He's not down in Costa Rica with me, but he's visited. Rythmia is a macaw sanctuary. We got officially licensed as one, and they've put up 4 nests all around the property. So we have those bright red, orange, blue, green macaws, and they're always in pairs, and they fly all around. So it's beautiful. And then I don't know if you were, and when you were in Arenal, if you got to see some of the toucans. Yeah. Those are really cool with the long beaks, like the Fruit Loops guy. And so my kids love those. And you know what's interesting are the blue jays that we would call blue jays, but they're down there. They have a different name, kind of like the same species. And they have like some weird antenna looking things. Those are amazing too. There's so many birds there, canaries, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I can tell you, that's the collared magpie jay.
Ah, there we go. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, on property at Rythmia, we've seen anteaters, porcupines, all kinds of cats, like jaguars, jaguarundis, they call them, and ocelots, and also just like typical mountain lion type cats.
Yeah.
There's an albino, the opposite of an albino jaguar that's black. So it's not like a black panther. That's some part of the other part of the world, but it's a black cat, big, that lives in the area. So we get to see quite a lot of wildlife for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've never seen a wildcat in Costa Rica, but definitely get to add a lot of numbers to my bird list whenever we go. And it was the collared magpie jay. That was one of the birds I was looking for in Tamarindo. So I was really excited when I first spotted one.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, Jeff, now let's continue with the personal side of things. You know, sometimes I have repeat guests on the show. I've been doing it for long enough that people come back. But when I first have someone on, I always like to invite them just to kind of tell their personal story because I think it's always interesting. Everyone has a story of how they got into psychedelic medicines, how that opened up within their lives. So that's where I'd like to start with you.
Sounds good. So I started off studying medical anthropology as an undergrad, and I was focusing on Latin American indigenous cultures and how they looked at health and healing. And so naturally, we talked a little bit about ayahuasca and some other indigenous medicines that were out mostly in the Amazon and other parts of South America, Central America. And then I thought, you know, I really like this. I'm going to get a doctorate in medical anthro. So I applied to some schools. I got into Berkeley, and I was going to go to Berkeley. But I realized, you know what? The academic professor tenured sort of track is a very committed one that I really want to make sure that that's for me. So I put my enrollment on hold, which you could defer 1 year. And then I went to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute and I got hired as a research associate with Dr. Carol Browner, who's like the premier medical anthropologist on the West Coast in Latin American studies. And I worked with her doing a prenatal diagnostic screening, cultural competency evaluation study with Latin American women, first generation, on prenatal screening, diagnostic testing, genetic testing, things like that. It was very interesting, the cultural side of the way they were viewing their prenatal care. And so I really thought that was interesting. We were publishing papers, but I saw the environment that my professor was in and what that life looked like. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know if this is for me. I like to surf. I like to do other things. These people were so committed. It's like all they did. They didn't have families.
Yeah.
They were married, but they didn't have kids. And I have 5 kids. So at that time I did not have 5 kids, but my wife was soon to be delivering our first. So I was like, I don't know what to do. I was kind of lost. And my professor said, I can tell that you're more hands-on. Why don't you try to get into the UCLA School of Public Health and get a master's in that? So I thought, you know what? I looked into it. I applied. I got hired in. I was admitted, and I studied health policy and program development. So that's kind of more like the government side of healthcare, public health departments, CDC work. And I really loved it. And my advisor was Dr. E. Richard Brown, who's passed since, but he was the president of the American Public Health Association, like a very important dude in healthcare, worked on Bill Clinton's cabinet for healthcare. So this guy knew everything. And so I was mentored by him and a couple other professors at UCLA, and I really loved what I was doing. So after that, I was kind of already in the genetic testing and reproductive health arena from my previous research. And I went into OBGYN department at UCLA, and I got hired to run the clinics on the outpatients from the med center. And so what I was doing is I was trying to get funding for different programs and trying to reach low-income, underserved women in Los Angeles County to try to get healthcare services for prenatal health. So there I learned, wow, this is amazing. I really liked it. I was good at it. But I saw that as I was managing medical doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners, I saw that if I don't have a medical degree, I'm going to probably hit some walls because these people are all trained in that. So I went back to UCLA, took all my pre-medical sciences while I was running the OBGYN clinics. And then I got into medical school, and I got into the UCLA Medical School with the Charles Drew program. So it was 2 years in MLK Hospital in Watts, and then 2 years in Westwood for the classroom work. So I was really excited, ready to go. And then all my cohorts that I was working with at the OBGYN clinic, they said, you should get out of this while you can. You're going into the wrong field. I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, look, we're OBGYNs. We're trapped. We have so much debt. We're paying $500,000 a year in malpractice insurance. 1 out of 3 deliveries are suing us. And managed care, this is the mid 90s. Managed care was starting to really get a grip on California. We're asking these bachelor's level people from insurance over the phone, can we do this procedure? It's just a nightmare. And we all want out of it. So they said, if you're smart, you'll get out now before you're trapped. And I was like, And I thought about it, talked to my wife about it. And I said, all right, you know what? I've seen this. I didn't want to admit it, but I've seen that this is sort of a trap. So I said, forget it. And I applied to the Department of Health in Hawaii, had some connections on Oahu. And I just dropped out, didn't go to medical school, went to Hawaii and worked for the Department of Health, doing Native Hawaiian healing modalities with a lot of the kapunas and all the indigenous sort of health-related stuff that we were using to work with the Native Hawaiians on addiction and depression and anxiety and things like that. So I really loved it. But then I saw, look, I have a master's in public health. I need to get a doctorate in psychology to really do this the right way. So I went back to UCLA, did some work there, and then went into the California School of Professional Psychology and got my doctorate. And from there, I started managing a rehab while I was in my postdoc. It's a pretty well-known drug and alcohol rehab called Passages Malibu. I was administrative director. And that's where I saw all this alternative medicine that was available to people that was outside the box. Spiritual counseling, Chinese medicine, body work, just all kinds of really cool things that were not things that I had learned in my doctorate or in any of the UCLA sort of traditional medical model education. So that's where I was like, wow, this is really cool. I liked it. And that's what kind of opened my eyes to there's different things you can do outside the box, outside the paradigm for traditional, healing practices.
Yeah. Great. And so then I assume you went ahead and had your own experiences, say with ayahuasca or psychedelics. How did that come about?
Yeah. So at Passages, this guy checked in and he was a tough customer. He was really brutal, like angry. And a lot of people going through rehab are angry.
Yeah.
But he was extra angry and very difficult. He was from Pennsylvania. And him and I connected because he scared off all of his therapists that he had in the treatment center. They were like, I don't want to work with this guy. He's too aggressive. He's not committed. He's a nightmare. And so everybody was kind of saying, the treatment team was saying, you should just kick him out and have him come back when he's more serious. So I said, well, I'm not going to kick a guy out just for being difficult. I mean, everybody's difficult in their own way. So I said, I'll work with him myself. So for 2 months inpatient, I was his primary. And I just worked with him. And we actually got somewhere pretty good. And he dropped his drug of choice, which was Demerol. So that's an injectable opiate for surgery. So that was what he was using on the outside. It was highly addicted to that. But he was also drinking alcohol and doing cocaine, and his life was insane. So he was also like a very high net worth individual. He is a super successful entrepreneur. So he had just retired in his mid 40s with like $100 million, so he just had no restraints on him. So he was just going crazy. So after he left the rehab, I put him in my private practice for 5 years. And that was kind of standard for, work with people a couple years, 5 years, and try to get them focused. And again, I didn't like that model because it's always the same story after after 6 months, it's kind of the same old. So I was unable to give him a lot of really good tools therapeutically to help him snap out of it, because he was still doing cocaine. He was still drinking. He's still womanizing. He was super self-destructive. His family had already left him. His wife divorced him. His kids were mad at him. So on a whim, he heard about some plant medicine in Costa Rica. And he was challenged by this woman that was a therapist of Passages she would do outpatient work. And she told him, she says, look, I have been working with this couple of these people in Costa Rica that are using this certain plant that can really turn you around if you're open. And I think it will help you. So Jerry said, he said, I have nothing else to lose. I'm suicidal. He'd been suicidal a couple times. So he went down to Costa Rica. I didn't really know much about what he was going to go do. I just knew he was down there doing some sort of retreat. And he went to this house up in the mountains about an hour and a half away from Liberia, the opposite way of Tamarindo. Yeah. There's an area called Buena Vista. It's up in the Rincon de la Vieja. It's like a mountain area. And there was a house that he went to, and there was this shaman from Africa, from the Congo, and he participated in an iboga ceremony. And the iboga ceremony just was this incredible experience. And it really helped him see why he was the way he was and all the benefits that people have gotten out of iboga. It's great for addiction. It's great for opiates, obviously. And so he just had this breakthrough. He figured out all of his trauma, where it came from. He had sexual abuse as a kid. He just had blocked it. He never even thought about it at all. He just had no recollection. So all this stuff came up. He purged it out. He healed himself, and he got on the right path for once in his life. So he came back to LA, and he told me about all these experiences he had while he was on this plant medicine for a week. He did 3 ceremonies with this guy from Africa. And I was like, wow, what? And I was shocked and very intrigued, skeptical, because I never seen anybody turn around so quickly. And we call it the pink cloud in the recovery world, where they're so happy to be sober and they're so happy that they're kind of unrealistic, and then reality hits them and then they relapse. So I was really nervous about that. So I was very kind of watching him closely, but he continued to have this awesome attitude. He dropped all of his bad behaviors. I mean, he's still working on himself, of course, but the main big things were gone. And he told me, he's like, dude, you got to go down to Costa Rica and you have to try this, because you have to see what this is about. And I was very hesitant and nervous because I'd never done any psychedelics. I never had any experience. I wasn't a drug user. I wasn't a drinker. I was a student, really, and an academic person. So I no time for any of that stuff. I just never was into it. So I was nervous, but I went and I met with the same shaman and I went. Jerry came with me. His name's Jerry Powell. He's our CEO now of Rythmia. And I'll talk more about him later, of course, but I had the most amazing life-changing experience that I was not prepared for. I didn't even know there's all these barriers and this resistance that I had in my life that I was kind of operating from, that I was able to look at and have an ego dystonic sort of realization, which is sort of you step away from yourself and kind of become your own therapist. And it was just incredible. So after that, Jerry and I said, we want to have a place that's safe, that's medically licensed, that has doctors and nurses and counselors and coaches, and is comfortable for people, because this place we were at was just a dive. It was just this house, this junk house, and no medical treatment, nothing like that. So that's what started our quest to begin Rythmia. It was in 2014.
Well, so it sounds like you've been a part of it since the beginning then.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was just doing a little reading online and saw that originally, before it was called Rythmia, it had a different name, but it was primarily in Iboga Retreat Center.
Yeah, Muganda, it was the shaman, and he had a place called the Iboga House, and that was his house. And so what happened was, through his...
The house you just mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Iboga House.
So we initially hired Muganda to work with us, and so the name of his place and Rythmia, we bought the name, the Iboga House, so we could use his list to make contacts and reach out to alumni. And so people think that we were Iboga House, but we weren't. We just assumed the name into the Rythmia Life Advancement Center umbrella.
Okay. So Jerry Powell, he was your patient originally?
Yes.
Okay. So you were able to see these changes in him. I'm curious because you've mentioned something that I think is kind of like a big part of the dynamic of working with psychedelic medicines is that we have big, revealing, transformative medicine experiences themselves, but then you kind of added on, well, he's continuing to work on himself afterwards. So that because we everybody who works in this field, we know this dynamic, right? You have a big medicine ceremony. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe it's terrifying. Maybe it's ecstatic. You realize things about yourself. You're in that pink cloud. You're feeling like, wow, I'm just walking on clouds. Everything is awesome. And then the old patterns, they reestablish over time. Those unconscious, habits, they start to reassert themselves. So there's, especially as we've moved more and more into the idea of psychedelics as therapy, there's been more and more emphasis on aftercare, integration, the ongoing support, the ongoing work. And that's something that largely was missing. So I was reading some stuff about Rythmia online, and some people are saying that they think there's too many people in the ceremonies, like there's 70 or more people in the ceremonies. And I'm thinking about how this was 2008, 2009. I was going to the local Santo Daime church here in Ashland, drinking Daime. We're drinking like 3-5 times over the course of a night. There's a certain number of guardians who are watching the ceremony, but I think the largest ceremony I was at, there was something like 250 or maybe even 300 people there.
Wow.
But often, it was often smaller, but it's still around like maybe 50 people. So there's always a lot of people. And whenever there's a lot of people, there's a lot of energies going around, and one person over there is freaking out and somebody else over there is in bliss and that person's throwing up. And then now everybody's throwing up. But my point is with all of this is that sometimes people ask me like, well, what did you do for integration during that time period? And my response is, it wasn't even a word. Like, nobody talked about integration. It's like,
correct.
You come back, you do the next ceremony. So I'm curious with Jerry going through this himself and you being able to observe this and also that observation, well, he is still continuing to work on himself afterwards. What did you see at that time about what is the role for how we continue to guide and use therapeutic tools and whatnot for someone to really land the changes, not just, wow, I've given up these drugs, but then actually making structural lifestyle changes so that, because, as they always say in addiction work, if you're not changing your life and your associates, the people you're hanging out with, you're going to go back, right? So I'm curious,
Right.
in those early years of all of this, what did you see with Jerry? And also, has your understanding of that, has that grown over time? I mean, mine certainly has. I'm just curious for yourself.
Yeah, well, coming from the addiction world prior to Rythmia, because Rythmia is not a drug and alcohol rehab, even though it works with people that obviously have a history of addiction in some way, some of them. I learned that for people that do aftercare post rehab for 1 year, it's a 50% improvement in ability to stay sober. And then if they do it another year, then there's another 50% after that. And then the third year is like the sweet spot. If you can get 3 years of aftercare post drug and alcohol rehab, you're pretty much clear to be sober and get your life together. So I always knew that aftercare was a really big part of any inpatient facility, that we had to have a program. We had to have something for people when they get home. And right now we have a 13-week integration program that we offer. And it's an app. It's called Our Life. And in that app, there's group therapy. There's tools like guided meditations. There's breath work. There's yoga instructions. There's also one-on-one coaching available. The whole thing is free to our alumni, except for the coaching part. If they want a one-on-one sort of assistance, then that costs money. But everything else is free. The group is free, all the modalities. And so we also follow up with our guests 6 months afterwards. And we're starting to follow up 3 months now. So we're kind of shifting our check-in with people. But what I noticed with Jerry right away is that, he had 50 plus years of living a certain dysfunctional way.
Yeah.
He started smoking cigarettes when he was like 9 years old. So his whole life had been this really chaotic way of living with no real tools to be healthy. It was just about avoidance and violence and drugs and bad behavior. So to have a breakthrough he was almost 50 years old or 46 years old, to have a breakthrough and have that amazing sort of release from all this pain, he had no clue how to live. He had no idea. And he had some ideas about it, but he just kind of didn't know what to do. Like, how do I communicate effectively? How do I respect women? How do I respect myself? Like, he just had no clue. So what we noticed in him is that he still needed therapy in some form. The therapy was evolved because I was still his therapist and I had my own experience with plant medicine. So now we were doing it more focused on sort of the insights he had gotten and the tools he had been given during the therapeutic plant medicine process. So what we see at Rythmia is that sometimes people show up with a lot of tools. They've done a lot of work on themselves. They've maybe been in therapy. Maybe they do Reiki. Maybe they are a therapist potentially. We have a lot of people in mental health that come to Rythmia as clients. Or the bulk of them have no tools at all. They don't have a daily practice. They're just fresh, brand new to this whole world of outside the box treatment with plant medicine and other things. So our program, the week-long program that we have, very specifically teaches them how to use these tools. The breath work is amazing that we teach. We have 3 nights of it, and we show them how to do it. We make it so it's practical for home use. The meditations are also entry level. Everything's entry level at our place. Mm-hmm. The meditation, the yoga is very entry level, and everything is just geared to help people take these tools with them and use them afterwards. And having a community is very important. I'm sure you know. And a lot of these people come from parts of the world that don't have like-minded individuals. So we have these groups that we build each week with all of the people in that group. And we call it the light worker group number 462 or whatever week you are. And then you can stay in contact with these people. And they usually have groups themselves, or they talk and chat. They might all come back to Rythmia for a reunion, a couple years down the road. About 30% of our guests return at some point. And when they do, we have an alumni program for them where we teach them new intentions. We teach them how to use the ayahuasca a little differently. Because even though Jerry and I's first experience was with Iboga, we shifted into, because that opened our eyes to a lot of plant medicine. And we tried a lot of different ones. And we found that ayahuasca was much more conducive to a larger group. And our data that we collect, because we collect data every day, we have hundreds of thousands of data points. What it shows is that the larger the group during the week, the higher the success rate in people reporting that they got what they came for. And so it's kind of counterintuitive. You would think like, oh, well, if there's 10 people, you get a lot of attention. And that is true. But when there's 90, the energy of the group is so big and there's just this momentum that it's amazing. And we also have a very high ratio of staff to guest. It's like 5-1 usually in the ceremony. So every 5 guests, there's a staff member at least. And there's a lot of supervision. So big groups are actually really fun, and people prefer that are alumni.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you just mentioned that it might be seen as counterintuitive. But so when you were saying that, I just kind of mentally jumped into a completely different area. And what came to mind was like if I go to a music show, which actually I don't do much of these days. But anyway, thinking like the best shows I've ever been to is when the crowd is packed and that then you get that synergistic effect where everyone is enthused by the experience. And then also I'm a musician. It's also been many years since I've performed on stage, but it is so much more fun to perform to a large group of people who are all actively engaged in the music. And so there, it actually is, the more people you have, the more impactful it could be. So I could see that as translating into this. And just brought up another thought from one of the larger ceremonies that I was at the Santo Daime Church. There was an experience that happened. And maybe this was just me. Maybe other people had this experience at the same time. I can't speak for them. But, there's all these hymns that you sing in Santo Daime. Have you ever been to a Santo Daime ceremony?
I have, and they're very powerful, and I love them.
And you do the little dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you sing from the hymnarios. And there was one ceremony in particular where, again, it was rather large, and something about it where as people were singing, it became a one multi-voice and then as all these voices were sinking in, and then it was just like this structure was built, and then the structure just started moving up and up and up. And I would attribute it to the fact that everyone there was in sync, and it was a large number of people, that I don't think it would have had the same sense to it if it had been a very small number.
Yes, I agree. I've noticed that same energy. Because when we first opened, we only had 12, 15 people come in a week. And now we have upwards of 90 and 80 and 70 all the time now. This is a big difference.
Yeah. So I think you said, was it 2014 that you guys?
2014, we purchased the property and we bought a boutique hotel in Hacienda Pinilla, which is near Tamarindo. And it took me 2 years to work with the government of Costa Rica to get us medically licensed. So I worked with the Costa Rican Ministry of Health, and we created a licensing application with them, and we applied, we got accepted. And so we opened our doors in 2016 in January. So we just had our 10-year reunion.
Okay. So it sounds like over that time that there have been refinements and growths and additions. And I think that this is something that's important to kind of note because, again, like reading some of the reviews online, and I think it's legitimate for people to have critiques.
Sure.
But I think it is important to note that the whole model of the psychedelic retreat is relatively new. So, of course, you're going to have to learn as you go along to some degree. There's not like you can look at another model like, how are we going to do this? Especially if you're going to create a medically licensed center, and then figuring out like what is the good number of participants to have, and then what is the preparation that we need to do? What is the aftercare? What do we want to add in? What do we want to change? Like you also mentioned that you had a 6-month check-in. Now that's moved to a 3-month check-in. And I just think, like for young people who are just like kind of getting started in the psychedelic world, for them it might have been, these reaches have always been around, right? Like I'm 20 years old, like this has been here over half my life. But for those of us who are a bit older and have seen all of this develop and maybe been part of helping to develop, that it has been a process of learning as we go and then making changes accordingly. So I'm curious, how would you describe sort of that arc of from that inception to the growth of now a 10-year anniversary with Rythmia?
Yeah, and it's been incredible to watch it evolve because we've had 22,000, about 600 people through our doors. So we've had a lot of people. We're open every single week of the year except for 1 week in December. So we're a fully operating place that's super busy with 250 staff members on site. So it's a big production. 4 medical doctors, 12 nurses, paramedics, coaches. It's just this amazing place. So what we noticed at the beginning is we had our gut instincts about how we should run the place. And it's so crazy to look back on it and think that we were crazy to even assume that, because we had ayahuasca ceremonies every single night of the week. So 7 nights a week. And then in the morning, we would have San Pedro ceremonies 7 mornings of the week. So it was just this crazy thing. And we saw that it wasn't conducive. So what we would do is Jerry and I would have a ceremony with ayahuasca, and our intentions would be, what should we shift in the program? What should we change? And Jerry would have his ceremony one night and get answers, and I would have a ceremony a different night and get answers. Then we would compare. And usually we were on the same page with the changes. So the whole company is built on 2 things. It's built on customer feedback that we get from the guests when they leave on their exit survey. And then it's gotten from our own downloads or consultas that we've had with our own plant medicine experiences. And if we're uncertain about something, we'll include a third person, one of the shamans that we trust, to work with us to come up with the protocol. So it's pretty interesting as we go to hopefully expand in other jurisdictions. Other governments will say, well, can we see your policy and procedure manual? I'm like, well, okay. And it's just this funny thing because it says on Wednesday night, the mother ayahuasca told us, I'm being silly too, but obviously I wouldn't turn that into the government, but it's really based on our own consultas in that whole experience. So it's really nice. And nowadays we don't have any of that happen. We have 4 nights of ayahuasca, which is a lot in a week. And we don't have San Pedro anymore. We don't do that. And we really coddle the people outside of the ceremonies, but also inside, because of the fear people have going into this that are first-time people. So we're very aware of people feeling unsafe and things like that. So we really try to build a safe environment for them. And that was a big part of why we wanted to get medically licensed. And my background is in licensing. I used to license rehabs and hospital divisions and things like that. So I thought, we need a third-party observational group that can make sure that we're staying on track with all the health and safety. So that's why we even applied for the license, because we're the only ones that have it in the world. There's no other medically related health facility that has an actual license from the government. So it's kind of cutting edge. And like you mentioned earlier, we didn't know how to apply for this because no one had ever done it. When I applied for the rehab licensing, I just followed the previous 3-year protocol that had been done 3 years ago, and it's so on and so on. But in this, nobody ever done it. So it was breaking new ground. And we've learned a ton. And we've made mistakes, of course. And we had no idea how to even hire for a place like this. Like, I'm used to hiring doctors and nurses and psychologists, not shamans. Like, I had no idea how to even look for a shaman. So we've learned over the years how to find the right people, that match our intentions, match our goals, but also respecting the traditions of the indigenous populations that we work with in Latin America. So it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least, for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And I think it's important to emphasize again that we're still in the construction phase of all of this, that, 30, 40 years from now, the idea of psychedelic retreat centers, it'll be more normalized. There will be the blueprint of, okay, how did they do it? How did they do it? What are the forms we need to fill out? What are the boxes we need to check? But this is something that's still relatively new in the world. And it's so different from traditional ayahuasca shamanism. Like we've already been talking about, aftercare. How do we prep people? How do we emphasize safety and things like that? That's not part of the ayahuasca world. I mean,
No.
You go down, you show up, you drink, you go home, right? That psychedelic retreat centers, psychedelic therapy, Western use of psychedelics is different than indigenous use. And it's still something that's under development. And I just think it's important for anybody in this world who's either overly enthusiastic or critical to really keep that in mind. Like, we're still figuring this stuff out.
That's for sure.
It's still
That's
under
an
construction.
understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what you shared about your own story and Jerry also kind of mirrors how it goes for a lot of people especially when people first get introduced to psychedelic medicine, there tends to be a lot of enthusiasm. Like somebody drinks once and they're like, I have been called, I need to share this with the world. And like everybody wants to facilitate. Everybody wants to serve.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be in service. And there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't mean everybody needs to serve medicine. Right?
Correct.
And then
Correct.
sometimes, you get your ass kicked. You go home and you realize like, damn, I wanted to heal the world and my life is still fucked up. So maybe I should attend to myself first.
Yes, that's the goal, to tend to self first. Yes.
Yeah.
We have different levels of plant medicine provider sort of positions in our company. So there's only a few handful of people that are actually serving the medicine, but there's a lot of people that are assisting and helping and supporting the process. So it is a journey for those that, really want to be in that world. And it's not easy. Obviously, it's a tough path.
Yeah. And also what I see in your story that you've shared here is often what I see with people who are new in the psychedelic world, there does tend to be an emphasis on more is better. I want to drink every night. I want to take cactus every morning. I want to microdose every day. And usually when I see people like that, they're usually chasing something. And really what we want to stop is the chasing, because the chasing is getting in the way of finding what's already here. And so it's not always about just drinking more. So I like to hear that you guys have pared it back, right? You've toned it down a little bit. And that's part of that. Again, that's part of the natural growth. And I think that a lot of people who get into psychedelics as well, that over time, they use them less and less.
Correct.
And there's less of that, oh, I've got to get to the next ceremony, or when's that next big experience going to be? Like I'm known for my advocacy for 5-MeO DMT, and people ask me all the time, like, how often do you do it? And it's like virtually never, actually. It was a fundamental part of my personal growth and transformation. But when I landed in that growth, what is the point? I'm not like every day, oh, I've got to take more 5-MeO. So anyway.
That's right. I believe in that 100%. Exactly that model.
Yeah. So getting back now to Rythmia, in building it out and then finding people to serve who are not necessarily Amazonian indigenous shamans, have you had some hit or misses there? How do you guys go about finding who do you feel is qualified and trustworthy? Because it's a huge responsibility. And so like these days, I like to say, like I work on the integration side. It's a lot less stress. It's a lot less responsibility. It's helping with that aftercare, which I find really satisfying. But it's a huge responsibility to serve people medicine. And because as we know, sometimes it's super hard. Sometimes people don't get what they think they're looking for. People do have, on occasions, psychotic breaks. I mean, the more people you serve, the more outliers you're going to get who have a really difficult time. Sometimes people do lose control. People lose their shit. People act out. This is part of medicine work. This happens. So the people who are serving the medicine, it's a huge responsibility. Yeah. So how do you guys look for people that are qualified? And like if somebody comes to you with a resume, or if you go out headhunting for someone, what are you looking for?
Well, first of all, we ask that every person who works at Rythmia goes through our program for the week-long visit. We don't require staff outside of the plant medicine department to participate in the plant medicine, even though most of them like to, and they do. Like the people from the kitchen don't have to drink the ayahuasca, but a lot of them have. I'd say about 80% of our staff have participated. But when we're looking specifically in the plant medicine division that's working in the Maloka and serving medicine, supporting that whole process, we got really, really lucky that we met a man named Mitra. And Mitra is trained in the Colombian Yahe tradition, and he is a wealth of information. He's an amazing teacher. He's the guy that's our anchor at Rythmia. And from him has come a network of people that we've learned from and that we've picked from. But even though those were originally outside people, we've trained from within. A lot of our plant medicine department now used to be in accounting, used to work in the gift shop, used to work as massage therapists on site, used to work in the guest services, used to work down in the clinic. We have a nurse that wanted to join the plant medicine. So we take people ideally from within our own company and we put them on a path if they're interested. They have to, of course, want to, and they work their way up. So all the people right now that are serving ayahuasca at Rythmia are all homegrown people. And in order to get somebody that's fresh outside that puts in a resume, let's say, that's not starting off in accounting, but has maybe some background or some experience, we have to put them through our program and see, because we're teaching 3 intentions to all the guests that we find are very important. And if their old tradition, which might not maybe blend with those 3 traditions, if there's a conflict, then that's okay. Like, that's just normal, but we have to kind of reconcile if that's going to work for us. So what we're really looking for are people that are obviously very open and people that do not become, as we call it, sort of a God complex where they feel that their healing is what is bringing the guests. Mm-hmm. That's not how we look at it. We look at each individual is healing themselves, and we're help facilitating the process. And self-work and your own protocols for yourself are super important. So our team has a lot of time off, and I'm constantly training didactic classwork for them in all of the psychological things that come up. Like if there is a break, or if there's somebody that runs, or if there's somebody that decompensates, I'm teaching them as a psychologist how we're going to work with those people. But I'm collaborating with Mitra, who's involving the spiritual shamanic side of that. So I think Rythmia is a really good blend of those 2 worlds that come together. And it's funny because my background in the psychiatric hospital, my postdoc was at this place called Los Encinas in Pasadena. It's a pretty famous it's a Hollywood hospital where Marilyn Monroe was there and Jimi Hendrix. Is this cool place, like a lot of history. And when I was in there, I worked in the locked units. So they're very high acuity people. So I did all the med management. I did the rounds through there. I was there for like 8 years. And so I learned all of the ways that somebody can start to go down the wrong road and what it looks like. So we pull back we don't let everybody continue the plant medicine if they're starting to kind of escalate. Mm-hmm. Again, it's rare because in order to even get to Rythmia, you have to jump through a lot of hoops on a medical clearance. So we're not just taking whoever wants to come. We turn away about 20 people a day. And some of those people can prepare themselves and come later, but a lot of people are not appropriate based on medical conditions or psychological conditions.
Yeah. I'd really be interested to talk a little bit more about that, because it is a medically licensed facility, and just kind of this sort of juggling of these 2 worlds. So, I mean, there is the psychiatric profile, and then there's also the shamanic worldview of spirits and energies and things like that, that these are not necessarily complementary models. One, you're applying for a medical license. I mean, there is, as far as I know, there's no medical licensing for shamanism and shamanic practices. Correct. And shamanic worldview.
Yeah, there's no academic licensing board for them.
Yeah. So going back to even like the founding of Rythmia, like what are the hoops that you needed to jump through for that? And then maybe tell us a little bit more about what does that mean? Because again, it is somewhat unique that we don't have, there's lots of retreat centers in Costa Rica. There's lots of medicine being served. What is that bonus of being medically licensed, and what really does that mean? Expanding on what you've already shared a little bit here.
Well, I think what makes Rythmia unique are two separate things. One is that medical license, and the other is that people come and they get a miracle in their life. And we use that as a miracle is a broad category of things. Everybody has their own belief about it. But our miracle, as we call it, is having people meet those 3 intentions, which are show me who I've become, understand your dissociative state that you might be in, merge back with your soul at all costs. So let's not be dissociated all the time. Let's be plugged into who we really are as people, and let's be intentional about our lives. And then the third one, heal my heart, which is get rid of all the trauma and the pain and all the sadness we've been through. And so those 3 intentions, when they're met at Rythmia, we call that you came and you got your miracle, because that is a miracle, in our opinion, to completely look at your life in a healing, healthy way and move forward with intention, with, as we call it, personal sovereignty. So that's a big part of that is our program. We call it the Rythmia Way. So that's a big sort of focus of us. But the medical license is very important for us because it gives the guests, like I was mentioning earlier, that sense of safety. And it also, it was very interesting. Like, I don't know if it's luck or if it's, the universe or whatever you want to call it, but the people lined up just right for us in the administrative side of the government. The Minister of Health of Costa Rica, the President of Costa Rica, the Vice President, all the regional offices and departments of different ministries. They were all in the right time for us to have this accomplished. And it wasn't cheap, and it took a long time, and it was a lot of back and forth. But my background in public health and Jerry's background in medicine, because he used to run 165 outpatient surgery centers. That was his entrepreneurial healthcare stuff that he did. So this was like, it had a lot of similarities to like the policies that we were going to do for safety and regulation. And so I think what it is that makes us so unique with this is that people know that if they need an IV, they got one right there. They know that if they have to go to the hospital, which has happened 8 times out of 22,000 plus people, more people go to the hospital at the Marriott down the road than Rythmia. So we have an ambulance there. And they also know that there's 24-hour nursing. So all of these things are part of that license because there's certain requirements to be certified as a health facility or a hospital type environment where you have to have a certain amount of doctors, certain amount of nurses. And there's all these things that you have to have that are part of it's called the Colegio, which is their licensing board for nursing and medicine, but also with policies and protocols that involve emergency medicine, requirements of who can participate and who cannot, because we're prescribing ayahuasca to people through our medical doctors. So people come up, they have a chart, and we triage them, and they go through a medical intake with a clinical interview, psych eval, not an official assessment, psych eval or a battery, but just like a mental status exam, which is just a conversation. And we go through all these things with them once they're on site. But prior to that, with their sales associate, they went through a lot of medical checks and balances with us. And we email back and forth like, okay, these meds 30 days off, these meds 2 weeks off, taper that, taper this. And they have to consult with their prescribing physician. So there's all these types of health conditions that the Ministry of Health has agreed these are okay, but these conditions are not, such as an irregular heartbeat or an open heart surgery history or a pacemaker. Things like that are no-goes for Rythmia. Whereas maybe some places in the jungle might not even ask those questions, or if they do, they don't maybe have a problem with it. I know that like the indigenous community, they'll give pregnant women ayahuasca, they'll give children ayahuasca, and it's fine. Nothing happens. It's actually great. But we don't do that at Rythmia because of our medical requirements that we still have to juggle, what's required at the government level with us.
Yeah. And then are there actual like inspections that take place? Do people come with their little clipboards and?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Site How visits. Does that happen?
It happens about once every 2 to 3 months, and they site visit us without announcing, which is normal. And, we're required to constantly be filling out paperwork and outcome data and numbers. And we have to relicense ourselves every 5 years. And so that's been great. Like no problems with that. They keep relicensing us. We're not causing any problems for them. And so we're very involved with them. We have a great relationship with the Ministry of Health.
Yeah. So then on the other side is sort of, as we've mentioned here, kind of the shamanic aspect to it. Is that part of the protocol of how people are worked with the Rythmia? And then how do we, because that opens the question of, okay, we're really solid on the medical standard sides, but again, how do we hold people accountable or even measure? Because especially in the shamanic world, there are so many self-proclaimed healers and shamans and gurus and facilitators.
Totally.
Which, there's in the psychedelic world, there is a lot of that God complex of like, I don't know which one it is, but I've read something about somewhere where some guy's got the long hair and he tells his clients he's Jesus or something like that. you
Yeah, I
know,
think
and
it's in
that's out
Brazil.
there. It's part of the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So how do you guys? What do you do to kind of keep everything on the up and up with that side of the practice?
Well, I would say the shamanic sort of interventions that we're using every day at Rythmia, I wouldn't say that they're in line exactly even with the medical side, because the medical side is what gets us licensed and the ability to operate.
Yeah,
So the medical side is the leading side of the company, but very close second is the shamanic side. And so the way we manage that without it going totally off the rails is we have a protocol that we've trained the shamans that has 4 identifying factors when there's a client going through a tough situation. And we've trained the shaman team on these 4 sort of ways to assess a client. And the first one is very simple. It's like, so let's say somebody feels really scared or overwhelmed and they're terrified to go back to the next night and they just want to leave. So we just tell them, okay, like, let's identify how you're feeling right now. So of course they're feeling scared, they're nervous, they don't want to talk to anybody, they want to just go home. Okay, cool. So then we say, all right, when was the first time you remember feeling like that in your life? And they say, well, let me think about it. They go, probably when I was about 6 years old and my mom got into a car accident and didn't pick me up from kindergarten for 2 hours. I didn't know where she was. Okay, good. Then number 3 is this a theme in your life? Are you feeling like, you're always afraid of sort of new things or things that put your neck out there a little bit? Are you averse to that? They say, actually, yes, my spouse has told me, I'm acting nervous all the time. I know I can get this promotion in my job, but I always sabotage it. Okay, there you go. Okay, so then what has this made you become? And that's what funnels back into the intentions. So we believe in something called a parallel process. And that's whatever's going on in a clinical environment or a clinical setting or a shamanic setting or a place of healing is likely going on for you outside in your life. So that's how we sort of manage the difference or the kind of the blending of the psychological, emotional stuff with a shamanic intervention. Because, sometimes people have these visions, and the visions we believe are often symbolic, or they could be right on point. Like you might have to be careful of something in the future, but we don't really focus on that. We look at the emotion that surfaces during those visions or during those things, because sometimes people will say, I just realized I have sexual trauma from my dad and I never knew anything about it. And then they're all upset. And then but we calm them down. We go, look, it's not likely that's what's happening, maybe, but let's look at how you're feeling about it. And then once we sort through the emotional side and then the shamanic sort of support within it, then they usually get to the place that's important, which is the emotional release or the purge that we're looking for.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it's kind of in line with what we would these days call like trauma-informed therapy, of where we're looking at where are the patterns, where did the pattern first get established, what was it in response to, what kind of event or something like that. And I appreciate what I'm hearing from you around what I would call the realm of interpretation. So this is a place where I often get very critical in the psychedelic world when people want to say my vision is literally true and I must do these things, or this is something that happened. And that's where the language I usually use with people is I say, well, what was the energy underneath it? And that ties into what was the emotion, and also what was the response? What did I do with my body? And I always like to say, like, take visions lightly. So often what I'll do is I'll compare things to Star Wars, and I say, look, because when I was a kid, I was such a Star Wars fan. It's like,
me too.
It's like, look, I knew none of that was real. But when Luke learned that Vader was his father and it just completely changed his whole worldview, I mean, that had a big emotional impact on me. So that's my example of saying, like, something doesn't need to be literally true to help you reflect on yourself and understand yourself. Star Wars, there's nothing true about Star Wars. It's all made up. But man, it really informed my sense of self. And so that's what I mean.
I love that. That's a great example.
Yeah. So when we have a psychedelic vision, it could just be Star Wars.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. We find that most of the time it is just Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. And so look at what are the energies that are being represented there? How does that impact you emotionally and also psychologically? And then see, like you were saying earlier, that ability to kind of step back from your life when you're not enmeshed in it. And that's one of the beauties of psychedelic medicines. It gives you that witness perspective where you can say, oh, look at that. But it doesn't mean that everything that we see is literally true. It's more often symbolic and energetic in nature.
Absolutely. And that's that movement from ego syntonic to ego dystonic. And a lot of the personalities, so-called personality disorders, they were in the DSM 4 before 5 came out, were related to like having a personality disorder individual will see the world as through their own eyes only. They can't understand there's other perspectives. Obviously, that's a dysfunctional way to live. So moving from that position into an ego dystonic where you're realizing, wait a minute, there's other perspectives, there's other things that are valid. I need to enmesh in with that and have respect for these other sort of realities. And that's what, in my opinion, ayahuasca is really good at doing. And most of all the plant medicines, because that's where you do become, you step away and you look at yourself. And that's very empowering, you know? And the example that I give, my Star Wars example, is where I tell people, I say, look, 5th and Broadway, Manhattan, New York, super busy intersection. Thousands of people per day walk those crosswalks. And at one given moment, there's probably 1,000 people in that intersection. And if there's a car accident and you go around and ask everybody what happened, they got 1,000 different stories about what happened. But if you ask everybody, how did they feel when it happened? They all have the same emotion: scared, worried, upset. And that's the reality, is the emotion. And so that's what these visions usually mean. They're bringing up emotion for us to purge. And it's a psychosomatic response. And that's what we're really going for, is that emotional release that's physically based.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. And then I want to return to a medical topic briefly. But yeah, the energetic purge, the catharsis, as we all know, especially with ayahuasca, often it's also physical. We've got it coming out both ends. And this is where the break actually can be cathartic for people if they've been too locked into a rigid personality structure. Having a temporary suspension of that and a break releases that. And so I think that this is an interesting place where we're still kind of melding Western psychology and psychiatry with sort of the plant medicine world and coming to understand that. But what's the basic view that you as a doctor, and then also how is that understood in Rythmia? And it seems like it ties in with the use of the word miracle. So if we could just unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah. So, if somebody has anxiety from since they were a little kid and they were anxious and worried or nervous, and their parents or caregivers were like, not tolerant of that. And they just, why are you so worried? And they kind of shame the kid. And you learn that it's not safe to be anxious, and I need to hold it in. I need to bottle it up. So I'm never going to let this out. And so what happens, a lifetime of doing that leads to physical ailments. And on the lighter side, maybe just some tightness, abdominal tightness, or maybe irritable bowel syndrome, for example. On the more severe end of the spectrum, cancers, autoimmune disorders. My buddy that I grew up with, he's an MD, PhD, runs a lot of the SUNY stuff in New York. He was the dean of the SUNY Harlem Center in New York. He just got diagnosed with lupus. And I'm like, dude, it's because you're totally stressed out. He said, that's exactly what they told me. So emotion will create physical symptoms. And so what happens when you drink ayahuasca, you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm a nervous person, so I need to stop being nervous. Well, they don't maybe realize that it's all been held in their body. So this release, this purge, whether it's throwing up or going to the bathroom or whatever it might be, sweating or maybe twitching around a bit, that's the psychosomatic release that we need to happen. Because once that's out and those emotions are released, because the shamans will also say, look in your bucket, after you've thrown up, and ask, what is that in there? It's a pretty interesting little hint to say, wow, that's my trauma, or that's my fear, or that's my anxiety, because you're physically getting it out. And in that moment, your brain is very moldable. It's synaptic plasticity, as I'm sure you've talked about on your show lots of times. That's where the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are really, really connected. And that's where you can set, with intention-based goals, new ways of thinking that are more conducive and more appropriate for you. And to me, that's why psychedelics in general are so effective. is because you're really establishing a new neuron pathway that's based on the intention you have, and it's done with this mindfulness that's assisted by the substances that we're using. Psilocybin, LSD, and DMT are really good at having that synaptic plasticity moment. So for us, it's, the analogy is, if you have a path in the jungle you've been walking on your whole life, it's a very clear path. But as soon as you stop walking that path, the jungle's going to grow over it in a matter of days. And then if you're going to build a new path, you got to hack through it with the machete, but then you need to start walking on that one. The old one's always there, but it's hidden underneath the bush. So just don't flop back to that one, stay on the new one. And so that's the synaptic plasticity sort of example. You can always fall back into those patterns, but let's keep you going on the one that's new, that was based on your intentions. That has a lot to do with the epigenetics concepts that are coming out in the research now that I really love.
Yeah. And that's where it goes back to this idea that we've already talked about, that it takes establishing different patterns, practices, lifestyles. It's great when people get the quote, their miracle, but you've got to help the miracle land. Like, that's your responsibility. It's not the medicine's responsibility. That's your
Correct.
responsibility. And then also potentially the responsibility of those who served you and how they're able to attend to you with aftercare and support and integration. But still, it's even with support and guidance, it's still up to you, right? Every person has got to make their own transformation land. I think it's an interesting question when we go to the psychosomatic cause of illness. Sometimes I get a little bit cautious because sometimes I see people who want to describe every illness as psychosomatic or emotional in nature or as a response to trauma. And that's where I think we go too far, that I do think that there are some things that have just a material cause. It's not because you are lacking in your emotional resonance,
That's right.
Like a little baby who gets leukemia.
That's right.
Like that little baby did not establish any behavioral patterns or emotional patterns that caused that, or somebody who's born with a defect or something like that.
That's right.
I'm curious how you guys address this, especially that you do have the medical licensing, that it's common with people with some kind of physical ailment turn to psychedelic medicine in the hopes that it will treat that in some capacity. And I think we have anecdotal evidence and stories that sometimes, yes, people's physical ailments do transform and change. Not for everyone.
That's right.
How do you guys manage that expectation or even that belief? If somebody comes in firmly believing my osteoporosis is an emotional response to trauma, so I'm going to uncover that trauma and release it, and then my osteoporosis is going to go away. For example, I just kind of made that one up, but how do you guys address that?
We deal with this quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So first of all, which is nice about having a medical license is that it's a legal issue. No medical facility can make medical claims. So right off the bat, we don't tell people, "Hey, come here and cure your cancer," right? So that's a good thing right off the bat. But nonetheless, people do come to Rythmia, and we had a person recently say that, "Hey, I'm here to cure my cancer. I believe it's all based on my trauma from childhood and all these things." I said, "Okay, well, maybe, but nonetheless, follow the intentions." Ayahuasca on the medical side, as we know, is anti-inflammatory, and it can't. There's some theories as to how it can help with tumor cells on certain types of cancer, but I don't get into that with the clients. I don't really explain that too much to them because that will just take them on a wild goose chase. But what we do say is, look, the more grounded you are in yourself, the more connected you are in yourself, the better you can handle what your life presents it. And so, we have had people report to us that they healed all these different infirmities and different illnesses. But we want to make absolutely certain that we're not promoting that to our guests, because it's actually can be extremely detrimental if they're there to think that's going to happen. Because nonetheless, if someone's going through cancer treatment, to be grounded and to be clear in their mind is going to help no matter what. So that's kind of what we're trying to strive for. But with our medical license, we do get that quite a bit with people, especially with autoimmune disorders that come a lot. And sometimes early stage cancer comes. and they find great benefit in it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to eradicate that. My brother-in-law is at Duke, and he's the guy that just recently came out with this mathematical stuff on cancer and all kinds of illnesses. And we used to think that disease and illness was environmental and behavioral, mostly, like cancer was. Like if I'm chain smoking, that's why. Or if I'm, negative and angry, that's also why. But what he found, and it's been published all over the world, is that it's also based on just bad luck. And so you might just have this happen, and it has nothing to do, like you were saying, with I have all this emotional trauma. I mean, there's, not at all. It could just be your DNA lined up like this. It's a mutation, or you just got this illness, and it's nothing you did wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's the flip side of it. That when it gets over promoted, that everything is the result of some kind of emotional withholding or deficiency, that can empower people to explore that and release that. But the flip side is, if I don't make it better, I'm doing it wrong. I'm the failure. I'm not visualizing hard enough. I'm not meditating hard enough. I'm not praying hard enough. I'm not drinking enough ayahuasca. I'm not doing the work properly. And I think it's a really important message to kind of keep repeating out there in the healing world, in the psychedelic world. Shit happens.
Yes, definitely.
Shit happens that you are not responsible for. And that when people ask me about like physical healings with psychedelics, I like to say, hey, I think it's a possibility. But kind of along the lines of what you're saying here, what I like to promote with people is like, chances are this can help change your relationship to whatever it is that you're suffering from, and that can have a really positive impact on your life. But if you are exclusively holding out that I must physically resolve this, you just might be banging your head against the wall, and that then can spiral into depression. And again, this sort of this self-critique of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And
that's
so I think it's a fine balance of, holding out the hope that maybe this cancer will go away.
Sure.
But at least I can get healthy with my relationship to the cancer. And it's like, with these studies with psilocybin and end of life, people with terminal disease, like they're not taking the psilocybin to not have the disease and not die. It's so that they can die with dignity and die with grace and not be in a state of fear and anxiety, which I think, because we're all going to die. Like no matter how much medicine you drink, you're totally going to die. So let's make peace with the reality that entropy exists and that all physical systems will degrade over time. We're not going to live forever, and we're not always going to be in perfect health.
Yeah. And if you're not afraid to die, then you're not afraid to live. And so that's a big part of our program too. Like, let's get that death fear out of the way, and ayahuasca is really good at that one in particular.
Yeah. So let's go back now to, this is really a question for you as, on the medical side of things that, I'm sure you have experienced at Rythmia, that there are probably a lot more people who think or feel that they are in immediate need of medical attention and take me to the emergency room. I need the doctor. But maybe it's just part of the process that they're going through. And that they don't actually need a doctor. But then sometimes people might. How do you guys make those distinctions? How do you help navigate that, especially when someone's in the throes of the medicine?
Yeah, because a lot of the illnesses that are, let's say, problematic on ayahuasca look also like just a typical ayahuasca ceremony.
Right.
So like serotonin syndrome, for example, looks like an ayahuasca session. the eyes darting, the blood pressure high, sweating, pacing. Somebody could be doing that in a ceremony and looks just like a serotonin syndrome. So the way that we are able to navigate all of those potential things is, first of all, when we do our medical intake on the weekends, because people show up on a Saturday or a Sunday to check into Rythmia for their week, we are aware of all their medical history. So we know if this person traditionally has high blood pressure or if they're on blood pressure medication, which again is fine. It's not contraindicated. So we have a profile of who's maybe higher risk than the next guy. And so what we do is we inform our whole medical team of certain guests to look for, And then we introduce the guests to the paramedic who's at night walking around the Maloka. And then we have our medical director who lives on site. They meet him as well. And then I'm on site quite a bit. Even though I live nearby, I'm also on site. I have a little room there, and I'm there at night usually all the time, if my wife lets me, of course. and then so there's a lot of support that we have people we know we're looking for. And sometimes people are just scared and they think, well, I can feel my heart beating. I think I'm having a heart attack. So that's where our paramedic takes them and off to the side. We'll check their vitals. We'll do a quick triage. And most of the time, they're totally fine. Or let's say it is too elevated. We take them right down to the clinic. It's an urgent care. It's a full-on urgent care center on property. And we might give them an IV. We might give them some meds. Or we might just let them just stay in down there and kind of just talk to somebody. A shaman team person will come down if needed, give them the traditional healing right there in the hospital bed. And so we'll do all that kind of stuff. And most of the time, like I said, there's only been like 8 times where we've had to actually take somebody to the hospital out of 22,600 people. So, but we want people to feel safe and know that they have access to those things. A common one is even during the day. I'm so dehydrated, I'm weak, I need an IV. Then we take their vitals and they don't need an IV. And it's actually not appropriate to give them one. So we'll just hydrate them with electrolytes and stuff. So we are on top of, like, nobody falls through the cracks at Rythmia. We have a case conference meeting every Wednesday at 10 a.m. We go through every single person that's there. Where are they in the process? What's going on? We put their picture up on the TV, and the whole staff that's client facing is informed about what's going on with everybody there. So it's not like you get lost at Rythmia or forgotten about. Like, if there's somebody that's isolating, we know where they are, what's going on. We do rounds on them. We tell them, hey, are you okay? And we might have a coaching session with them. So the whole thing is like this big facility where everybody's getting looked at and supported.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a lot of work. I mean, if you guys have like 70, 80 people a week, that's a lot of people to go through.
Yes, it is. Yes. That's why the 250 staff are stretched thin sometimes.
Wow. 250 staff. That's huge. How big is the property itself?
12 acres.
Oh.
We have 100 beds and 65 rooms.
So then maybe let's just talk about the process for people. So if somebody is curious about Rythmia, and you guys have got your marketing, right? Everybody gets their miracle, 98% get their miracle. And I think it's really important to, as we've done here, to sort of unpack, like, what do you mean by that? Because like somebody blindly reads that, am I like, oh, am I going to be walking on water? Am I going to be, turning water into wine? Like
levitating.
What kind of miracle you're talking about? But I think it's actually much more balanced and grounded than sort of that mythical view of what a miracle might be. So what is the process for people then when they first contact you guys, and then once they've passed the medical screening? Well, actually, I'm jumping ahead. So there's medical screening. So anyway, what's the process?
So we have an 800 number that's on our website that people can just call. And our website is just Rythmia Life Advancement Center, or just Rythmia. And we also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. And on the website, you can fill out a form. If you don't feel like calling the 800 number, you can fill out a form, and then one of our sales associates will contact you. And then once they learn of the pricing, whether they can afford it or not, we also have a scholarship program that covers the price, and they don't pay anything other than their flight. And we just had a press release about this last month. We've given out over $1 million worth of scholarships over the last several years. So that's a big part of what we do, is we want everybody who wants to come to Rythmia, who's qualified medically, to be able to come. So we always tell people, if they can't afford it, just hang in there. Our average price is about $7,000 for the average price. The only difference in price, there's 3 prices, is the type of room you want. So everything is included. Everybody has the same exact program, food, everything included, massages, hydrocolonic cleanses, everything's the same. Just if you want to be in a room with a king bed by yourself or with your partner, or you want to be in a room with 2 queens, or if you want to be in a room with three twins, that's the only price difference. So it's pretty reasonable. The average price is $1,000 a night, and that includes all the ayahuasca, everything. And so the best way to get a hold of us, though, I think, is calling that 800 number, because then you start the process of the medical evaluation, and we send you the dieta. which is that way to prepare your mind and body to eat a certain way and get your mind ready. And also the medical requirements of the meds that are contraindicated and the health conditions that are contraindicated. Like type 1 diabetes is contraindicated. Type 2 is not, so we can work with that. But there's a lot of different things that we want people to learn about so we can help them. Because, ayahuasca is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Yeah. So that's why there's a lot of contraindications with it, whereas other psychedelics don't have the MAOI component. And I think that's why ayahuasca is a little bit more restrictive than your traditional psychedelics.
Yeah, because it has that potential to potentiate other medicines. I'm curious, for you, what's your understanding at this point, particularly around SSRIs? Because I know that in the psychedelic world, there's been a lot of concern with SSRIs and monoamine oxidase inhibitors. It seemed like a lot of the early concern was that people were going to be going into serotonin syndrome. And I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not making any kind of medical statements. My understanding is that at this point, the medical idea is actually more that SSRIs are generally going to just dampen psychedelic effects, so that it's kind of more of a dud. And I've seen this happen with people who they're still on their SSRIs, 7 grams of mushrooms, and they say nothing happens. And I was like, I don't know how that's possible, but I guess that's what it is. But once we get the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and then it changes a little bit. So what is the best that you could say for the medical psychiatric consideration for SSRIs and ayahuasca? What are the primary concerns at this point based on what we know? And this is still science that's under development.
Correct. So there's been a lot of recent studies I'm sure you've been aware of that are showing that the whole methodology and rationale for SSRIs has been based on, of course, we all knew this, it was based on a lot of theory, but they're finding that the theory of the serotonin reuptake was bogus, and it wasn't even what was happening. So there was a lot of placebo involved, but there was other biochemical mechanisms going on that, again, are still up for debate, and they're trying to figure that out. What we've found is, when I was studying, we studied very closely serotonin syndrome, the origins of when it was found out, diagnosed. It was an inpatient hospitalization of an 18-year-old girl. I think she was 18. And she was taking in the hospital MAOIs and SSRIs at the same time for multiple days in a row. And she was creating the serotonin syndrome that was building on itself with those two meds present. And that's what led to death in that hospital example. I think it was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And so what we've learned is through our experience and also study and also new research coming out is that there's certain SSRIs like Zoloft, for example, that needs to be 30 days off. But there's other ones that are second and third generation SSRIs that are usually, we're looking at about 2 weeks off. And so we go case by case with people to figure out like how long have they been on these meds. Sometimes we've got people who've been on meds 30 years. And then sometimes we've got people that started it last month. So we're going to look at those cases differently. But when someone is building into a serotonin syndrome, we can see what those symptoms are. It's very blatant because they feel miserable. They're super anxious. Their eyes are jotting back and forth very quickly when you analyze the eyeballs. And so we can tell when someone's in that mode the next day. And again, we've only had a few of those, thank God, because of the way we're screening people. But we're noticing that the serotonin agonists that exist, whether it's ashwagandha, 5-HTP, GABA, functional mushrooms, lion's mane, all these things that are surging serotonin to help with mood, we're finding that not all of them are leading into a potential serotonin issue, especially if they've been off of them for a certain amount of time. Some of the things we say, okay, just don't take them the same day as the ayahuasca, and it's been okay. But others that are med related, psychotropic related, we're reevaluating right now how long we need them to be off of. So for us, it's traditionally been 30 days, but we're looking at maybe 15. And I think the research is showing that it is like just what you said, it's dampening the experience. We've seen a similar thing with cannabis. So cannabis is not contraindicated. It's not dangerous if people use it right up until the week they come to Rythmia. But we're noticing if they're chronic weed smokers, they're not having much of an experience. It's dampening what's happening. And again, not for everybody. Some people, it's still amazing and whatever. But we're finding that psychedelic experience is kind of already occupied by that substance. So there's binders that are preventing that sort of visual or that sort of insightful experience. So we just like people to be completely clean if they can off of everything. And supplements these days are really interesting. And I like the supplements. Like ashwagandha is a great supplement, but we're telling people to not take that right up until they get to Rythmia, just for that same reason.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of a good selling point for why it's worthwhile to have a psychedelic retreat center that is medically focused so that people do get the best advice. And this, just a plug for anybody out there who's considering, going to a retreat, that it's important. You got to be honest with what you're actually taking and not hide any of that stuff so that the experience in the medical program could be curated for you so that it's the safest for you. And still with that, I mean, you're always rolling the dice when you take any psychedelic. There's no way to ultimately control how anyone's going to react in any given moment or what experience they're going to have. And so there's always a lot of variability, but it's best just to take whatever precautions you can and be as medically screened as you can so that, when that fear kicks in of like, oh my God, I think I'm dying, you can surrender to it rather than I've got to get to the hospital right away, just to minimize those complications.
I've noticed that when we're using yahe on Thursday nights, we've been doing that traditionally at Rythmia. That's a Colombian ayahuasca. And Colombia, the shamans there use mambe. And we don't use mambe at Rythmia. We don't give that to the guests at Rythmia. But mambe is the coca leaf powder that the shamans might chew on in the Amazon during the ayahuasca facilitation. And what the shamans told me is that if someone uses mambe, they make a pact with the coca plant that they're never going to abuse it in a cocaine form or a recreational form. So what's interesting is that if somebody has, at Rythmia, we've noticed if they have a cocaine addiction and they maybe didn't tell us they were clean or maybe they used recently before getting there, they have a really hard Thursday night because of just the Colombian sort of spiritual component to that. So our medical team has looked at that and said, wow, this is wild because the shamans are bringing up this sort of interesting point and we're noticing it medically too. So there is a really cool crossover like that we see often with all these plants and with the shaman tradition with our medical background. So it's really interesting, fun place to work and see this cutting edge stuff happening because I don't think there's a lot of psychologists that have seen 22,500 people do plant medicine. So I feel very blessed and lucky to be able to witness this day in, day out, like the effects of this. And it's just been such an amazing experience for me. It's just, I don't even have words for it, how beautiful it's been.
Yeah. Well, that raises the question for me of, have you guys ever talked with a research institute about instituting some kind of research program and actually getting some hard data other than the anecdotal reports? Or
Yes, we have. I'm working with a contract research organization right now to help us gather, collect, and analyze the data we have and moving forward with new data to actually start publishing papers. So a big part of our expansion into other jurisdictions, hopefully one day, will be a research component. And a lot of the countries that have started to kind of recruit us to come there, they're requiring that part of it, which I love. And so it's really exciting that we're going to start doing that soon.
Okay, cool. You guys have obviously had some celebrity associations and endorsements and things like that. Just curious what you would have to say about that. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? How has that served you guys? How has it served them?
Well, we've had our board of directors is a very interesting group of people. So we got Kelly Slater, 11-time pro surfing world champion. We have Ron White, the comedian, amazing guy, great guy, just there recently. We have Jack Canfield, wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He's also a great dude. Reverend Michael Beckwith from the Agape Spiritual Center. He's a business partner of ours. He's on our board. Martin Luther King III is on our board. Iyanla Van Sant, part of the Oprah Network back in the day. She's a thought leader, a very powerful woman. Tony Coe, Fortune 500 women entrepreneur, like amazing cosmetic mogul. And then we've had a lot of celebrities come there. We have Frank Biden's on our board, Joe Biden's brother, which is always interesting. We're looking to get some other politicians from all sides of the aisle. And we have different people from every political party come to Rythmia, which is always fun. And, we've had a lot of entertainers, a lot of athletes, pro athletes. And, it was interesting. This isn't confidential because he posted on our Facebook page and Instagram. We had Deontay Wilder there, the heavyweight boxer. And when he came, I was like a little nervous. I'm like, uh-oh, what if this dude like flips out in ceremony? We're all dead,
Yeah.
But he was the most grounded, chill, amazing guy ever. And he was just such an awesome person to have there. So what we've seen is that a lot of the celebrities or the people in the music industry or politicians or CEO types, all these like a thought leader people, they love Rythmia because it helps enhance what they're doing. And then their audience, whoever their audience might be, they get influenced in a really positive way to do the work for themselves that they're striving to. So it's been a beautiful experience working with the high profile people over the years. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Cesar Millan is on our board too. He's one of my favorites. He's the dog whisperer.
Yeah, that surprised me when I saw that. I'm curious. Has everybody on the board, have they all drank ayahuasca?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, all of them, multiple times.
Yeah. Wow. So Cesar Millan, my wife used to really, when we first got our dog, that she kind of religiously watched his show and was like really into his approach of working with dogs, and definitely impressive.
He's a guest speaker of ours too. So he'll come a couple times a year and teach. And I'm like, what's he going to talk about? Like dogs? But he talks about his same philosophy for animals, but he morphs it obviously into human success. And so it's very cool when he comes and speaks. I'm sure your wife would love it.
Yeah, it'd be quite interesting. I'm just curious about sort of the double-edged sword of when, like, again, I mostly work in the 5-MeO world personally, and sometimes people show me, like, they send me somebody's Instagram post of like, oh, I went to Tulum and I had Bufo and I had a life-changing experience. And then sometimes, so I help people with the integration, and I get people say, well, yeah, I saw people posting about how amazing it was. Nobody told me how difficult and challenging it could be, and I'm really struggling. And so there's kind of that double-edged sword of the influencers, the celebrities. They can raise awareness, they can inspire people, but it can also sometimes draw people in with sort of that glamour of like, oh, well, all the big names are doing it, and I just want to do it as well. How does Rythmia kind of balance that, or is that something that Rythmia tries to balance? I'm just curious.
We do. We actually, when we have a high profile person come to Rythmia that's going to be posting about their experience or talking to their audience about it, we help them, we coach them in a way that's appropriate to disseminate the information. Because what we've noticed in the world, other facilities that have had celebrities go to them, they didn't receive sort of a protocol on how to explain this. And so they've been on the red carpet or on talk shows, and they've just kind of talked about it in maybe a silly way or a really fun, entertaining way. And that's led to a lot of problems for people because we've witnessed it. And so we actually teach our people that come what to say, how to say it. And of course, they have their free will to say whatever they want, but we give them some pointers on how to handle this. Like Bobby Brown, he comes, the entertainer, he comes all the time. He's on the internet talking about Rythmia. And we've coached him on how it's best to say it and how to get people to not think it's for everybody, because it's not for everybody. And it's for people that feel the calling and people that are medically appropriate. And we all know that psychedelics are a miracle and amazing for people. But, my mom is never going to do them. And that's okay, because my mom's amazing. And so it's just for it's for people that feel, I think, the calling. But the celebrities do have that responsibility, I believe, to, not make it something that's a sensationalized sort of trendy experience that's lighthearted. It has to be something very serious for people that really want to change and change their life in a quick way to get on the path that they need to be on.
Yeah. So I've kept you for quite a while now, and I'm going to bring us to a conclusion. But just this one last question just kind of popped into mind, that given that how successful Rythmia is and how many people you guys work with, I'm curious, what inspires you to come on a podcast like this to continue to talk about it?
I love that question. So, I went into healthcare with a very clear focus of, I don't like what's going on in healthcare. I don't think it's addressing the deep underlying issues of what people need. I see that healthcare stabilizes people and helps in emergency situations. But if there's anything that's mental health related, I'm not seeing the outcomes that I want, because my clients were all high risk people and they were miserable. They were trapped in their behavior.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to help as many people as possible realize that there is a way to become empowered, to heal yourself, that there are communities, there are tools that are out there where people can access and use them in a way that's freeing, liberating. And I like to say, as I mentioned earlier, you can obtain personal sovereignty. And when I was in Hawaii, I learned a lot of really interesting Native Hawaiian healing practices and healing arts. And I learned some Hawaiian. I taught at the Kamehameha School's chemistry department, and at the University of Hawaii Lab High School, I was the chemistry teacher. And there's a phrase, it says, "A'ohe pau ka'ike, ike hala ho'okahi." And what that means is that all knowledge is not taught in one school. One can learn from many sources. And that's kind of my theme as I move in healthcare, that I want people to see that there's options for them, and that they can really use psychedelics and ayahuasca and others that are out there for the good of themselves, and they can get past that stabilizing dead-ended wall that they've maybe gotten to with therapy and medication.
All right. Well, it sounds like you are motivated and passionate about it, and obviously you like to talk about it. I mean, that's what we do on podcasts, is we talk about it. So we tend to find people who like doing that. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for your time today. So just to remind the audience, we've been speaking with Dr. Jeff McNairy, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Rythmia Life Advancement Center in the wonderful and amazing Costa Rica. I love Costa Rica, Pura Vida. Hope to be back again sometime relatively soon for the birds and hopefully a wildcat at some point. But thanks for your time today, Jeff. I really appreciate getting a chance to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And you're welcome to come to Rythmia anytime and hang out with us, or drink medicine, or just visit and check out the birds on site.
All right. Thanks.